Hi there guys, and welcome back to the mothership and welcome to another video. So in this video I'm going to be setting up a LAN cache, and for me it's going to be so I can cache Steam games, but it can be used for a number of things such as Windows updates. So if that sounds interesting, let's get started. Okay, so just what is a LAN cache? So let me beam over to my chair and we'll talk about it there. Okay, that's better. So what is a LAN cache? Well, it basically is exactly what it sounds like. It caches things on your local network that you'd normally download from the internet. So if any device on your network requests something which the LAN cache can cache, as soon as that first device requests it and downloads it, it's stored locally on the LAN. So then any other device that needs it doesn't have to reach out to the internet. It grabs it locally, which is much quicker, and it saves using bandwidth on your internet connection. Now personally, I use it for games, for Steam. I want to download games on my gaming VM, on my laptop, and also on a Steam Deck. Now yes, I could just use the internet to do that, but at the moment I'm using cell data for my internet, so it's really slow, and if I want to download a game on all three of those devices, it's much easier for me to use a LAN cache. Anyway, let's jump on the computer and talk about it a bit more. Now before we dive into this, I just want to apologise for the sound quality at the beginning of the video. After recording that footage, I realised I had the levels set wrong on my mic and it came out a bit weird. Anyway, let's carry on. So caching proxy servers have been around for years. Many companies and organisations such as universities, they often run that for caching traditional web traffic, but yes, certainly not for games. Now we can only cache HTTP traffic, not HTTPS, and this is fine for the game servers because the CDNs or content delivery networks, they use unsecured HTTP. We're able to intercept that traffic and save it locally. So using a LAN cache is not for everyone. For example, if you've only got one PC that you game on, there's really no point in having a LAN cache because you're going to download each game only once to that PC anyway, so you may as well use your regular internet. Now I guess there's one situation where having the one PC and having a LAN cache might be useful. Say you've got a gaming laptop and it's only got a very small hard drive on it. Maybe you want to easily kind of download and then actually remove games multiple times. And I guess in that case a LAN cache would actually be useful. Now where it becomes useful is when you've got multiple PCs that want to download the same game. This way the game only needs to be downloaded the one time, and all the other PCs on the network can easily download the game at full speed directly from the LAN. Now this is especially useful for people with really slow internet like I've got at the moment. I'm currently just using cell data, so downloading one game takes an age, and if I want to have it on more than one machine, well, using a LAN cache, I can do that easily and quickly. So what are we going to be looking at in this video? Well, we're going to be setting up three containers. Firstly, the LAN cache container itself. This is called the monolithic LAN cache, an all-in-one solution, and you can read about it here at lancache.net. Now us Unraiders, we will of course download ours from community applications. The regular LAN cache, it just caches games when we download them on the PC. So basically we need to install the game first to allow it to be cached. Well, if we want to pre-fill our LAN cache with games of our choice, we can do that too. We'll use a companion container called, well, you guessed it, LAN cache pre-fill, and this allows us to put our Steam account details into that container and then choose the games from our library that we want to pre-fill the LAN cache with. And yes, only games that you have in your Steam account. Come on, you didn't think that we could just download anything, did you? You must have paid for it of course, hence using your Steam account. Now lastly, we're going to install a container called LAN Cache DNS. And this container obviously handles all the DNS. I'll also show you another way to set up the DNS manually in your router, or even use the host file in Windows. Now I'm going to show you some problems that I had and how I overcame them. So hopefully by the end of this video, you're going to be able to set up a fully functional LAN cache on your server. Okay, so let's log into the server. Now the first thing we need to do is we need to decide whereabouts on the server we want to have the LAN cache data go to. For the LAN cache to work as best as possible, we really need the data going onto an SSD. I personally found when I set my LAN cache to be on the array or on an unassigned disk which wasn't an SSD, with some games when they're being re-downloaded from the cache, it could be quite slow. So by far the best idea is to put the location on an SSD. Most of us have an SSD for our cache drive, but there might not be enough space on the cache drive to be able to do this. So if you can, it's best to have a dedicated SSD for your LAN cache to keep everything separate. Now, I don't have that at the moment. Maybe that's something I'll get in the future. So for now, for best performance, I'm going to set up the LAN cache here on this 2TB SSD, which is also my cache drive. So I'm going to go across to the Shares tab and create a share there. Scroll right down to the bottom, click onto Add Share, and obviously give it a name. I'm going to be very original and call it LAN Cache. Now, as I want it to use the SSD, I need to set Use Cache Pool here. I'm going to set it to Prefer because I don't want Mover to move the files off the cache drive. I want them to stay here so they can be served to the Steam clients with maximum speed. Now, if I did have a second pool dedicated to the LAN cache, I could select that pool here, but as I don't, I'm just going to leave it on SSD cache. Now, because I've set this to Prefer, in the event the cache drive became full, it would actually spill over onto the main array. Because of that, I want to just set the included disk here not to be all, I just want it to be disk 4. So if ever the SSD became full, it's then going to put the extra data onto disk 4. Okay, so with that done, I'm going to click onto Add Share. Now there's no need to actually export this as a normal share. We don't need to do that, so we can finish and just click Done. Okay, so now we need to head across to Community Applications by clicking on the Apps tab and do a search for, LAN Cache. You can see a bunch of things here. Like I said earlier, we're going to be installing the LAN Cache container, the LAN Cache DNS, and also LAN Cache prefill. But to start, we're going to install the monolithic container, which is this one here, the official LAN Cache container. Just click onto Install. It will warn us here that we need to change the network the container runs on. Just click onto OK. And the first thing we need to do is to set that IP address. You should see here that the network type is set to custom BR0. If it isn't, you can select it here, or if you'd rather, a different custom network. We need to make sure that the subnet, which you can see here, this needs to be the same subnet or same IP range that your gaming PCs are on as well. I'm going to set the static IP address for the LAN cache for me to be 10.10.20.225. Now obviously don't just copy that, set that for a static IP that's not in use on your network. We need to leave the port as port 80 and port 443, make sure not to change those. And here at the bottom of the template, the logs folder here and the cache folder, we need to change the location from being in the app data for the location that we're using for our LAN cache. Now I can see at the end here, the location is /logs. So to make it easy, I'm just going to copy the word logs with Control and C here. And now I'm going to browse to MNT, user, and there's the share I created on the SSD for my data. And I'm going to paste logs on the end. Now again, I need to change this location to be the same here. So I'm going to copy this, again Control C, and I'm going to paste over that location. So now I've set both of these locations for the share earlier created for the LAN cache data to go. Okay, that's all we need to do for this, so let's click Apply and pull down that container. So once it's downloaded, click onto Done, and that's our first container all set up. So now I'm going to go ahead and set up the LAN Cache DNS here. Now what this does is it handles the DNS, so any of the game clients on the network, and for me they'll be the Steam clients, if they want to download data, all of the requests for those locations are going to be funneled through the LAN Cache container here. But all of the regular kind of internet, when you're going to maybe Facebook, eBay, that kind of thing, they're going to be unaffected and they'll just be sent out normally. So let's click onto the install button here and get this installed. Now it warns us here that some ports are already in use. Don't worry about that, just click OK. Because the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set a static IP for the LAN cache as well. So where you see network type here, change that to the same custom network as we had the LAN cache on, so BR0. Now the LAN cache DNS needs a different IP address to the LAN cache. So for me, I'm going to choose 10.10.20.224. We can leave the DNS port the same, and use generic cache, we can leave that as true. But for the LAN cache IP, this is where we need to put the IP address that we chose for the LAN cache monolithic server earlier. And for me, that was 10.10.20.225. Now make sure you don't just copy what I've put here. This needs to be the IP address that you chose for your container. And with that done, just click on to apply. And again, once downloaded, click on to done. And we're now ready to start using the LAN cache. So for that, I'm going to pop across onto my gaming laptop and download God of War. Okay, so here we are on my laptop. Now the first thing I need to do is I need to set the DNS on this laptop. So all requests are going to go through the LAN cache DNS. So requests for Steam go through that. Now the easiest way I can do it is to open up the network connections, and on my adapter go to properties, and under Internet Protocol version 4 here, notice I got IPv6 disabled. But on IPv4, I want to go to properties and check this box here, use the following DNS server address, and then I'm going to put in the IP address not of the LAN cache, but of the LAN cache DNS. And for me, that was 10.10.20.224. So with that done, I'm going to click OK and close these windows. To test this, we can open up a command prompt, and first I'm going to type IP config space /all, and here I can see that DNS entry that I put in. Okay, so let's clear this. Now next I'm going to ping the address lancache.steamcontent.com and hit enter. And we can see the reply I'm getting from here is not my DNS server address, but the address from the LAN cache, which for me is 10.10.20.255. So that's all good. Now if you didn't get the IP back of your LAN cache, then you can type the command IP config space /flush DNS, all one word. And after that, just try pinging the same address again, and hopefully this time it will be correct. Now if you want to do another test, we can type nslookup space lancache.steamcontent.com. And this time we can see here the IP address of the LAN cache DNS and the IP address of the LAN cache server. Now if I type ping space google.com, then we can see here I can still access the internet from this laptop. But now if I type nslookup space google.com, then again I can see everything here is going through the LAN cache. But one important thing to look out for, if we go back to the Unraid server and we turn off the LAN cache DNS, and now when we go back here and we run the same command again, well, we're not going to be able to get anything at all. So always be careful when you've changed your DNS in a computer that you're always going to be able to reach that DNS server. Otherwise your internet's not going to work. Now if we didn't want to actually change the DNS locally inside our computer, I'm just going to go back and change it back to how it was before. So back to properties, IPv4, and I'm going to put obtain DNS server address automatically. So now if I open up a terminal window and type ipconfig space /all, and now we can see that the default DNS server is 10.10.20.1, which is the IP address of my router. The IP of my laptop here is 10.10.20.109, which obviously was given out by the router. Now if I ping lancache.steamcontent.com, I get a reply back, not from my Steam cache, but externally from the CDN on the internet. And if I do an nslookup on the same, this confirms 100% that our local Steam cache and our local Steam cache DNS isn't being used. Okay, so now let's have a look how we can actually give out the IP address of the LAN cache DNS to all of the DHCP clients on our network. Obviously, we're going to do this from the router, so I'm going to log into mine now. Now, I can't show you how to do this for every single router. All routers should be pretty similar if they allow you to do this at all. Obviously, you're going to be looking at the LAN settings, and on this router here, these are just the basic settings and they don't give me enough control. So I need to go to the advanced settings, and on this router, I need to click network settings here and then go to home networking. So basically what we're looking for is in the DHCP server settings is somewhere where we can actually specify the DNS server which is handed out to all of the clients. So for me this looks like it here, this DNS values part. So I'm going to click static here, Yep, so here I can specify which DNS servers are given out to the DHCP clients from the router on the network. So obviously I've specified the LAN Cache DNS here. So now with that done, I can apply the settings and come out of the router. And now I'm going to go back to the command prompt here, and I'm going to type ipconfig space / flush DNS. This will clear the DNS cache so I don't have any stale DNS. Now I'm just going to make sure that the laptop actually has the new DHCP lease from the router. So first I'm going to type ipconfig space / release, followed by ipconfig space / renew. So now I'll just check what my IP settings are with ipconfig space / all. And looking here good, the DNS server's correct, it's the DNS of the LAN Cache DNS. Excellent. And it's quite normal here that my IP address is the same as it was before. And so now we'll just run through the same tests as we did before, checking what we get back from various DNS lookups. Now having the actual DNS given out by the router can be really useful if you're hosting like a LAN party or something, because just the people come along and your router will give out everything that's needed for the LAN cache to work. Now the router I just showed you isn't actually the one that I use on my network, it's the one that was sent by my ISP. I actually use pfSense. So I just want to show you how to set the DNS there. So if you're using pfSense, go across to Services, then DHCP Server, scroll down, and under DNS Servers, just put in the IP address of your LAN Cache DNS. For me, 10.10.20.224. Then scroll down and click Save. Okay, so let's minimize pfSense and go back to the command prompt. And I'll just refresh the IP address quickly here. And if we take a look at the IP and the DNS server, we can see it's the LAN Cache DNS, the same as it was on the other router. There's one thing we need to be careful of when we're using this method. It's not just the requests to the CDNs that go through our DNS server, but if I was to ping google.com, we can see we get a reply. But if I go back to the Unraid server on the Docker page here and I stop my LAN cache, now let's go back to the command prompt, and if I ping Google again, we can see nothing's happening here because I've lost the whole of my internet. So you need to be really careful if you set the DNS on your router to use the LAN Cache DNS, because should you shut down your server or you shut down that container, then your whole network will lose its internet. Now in pfSense we can do something quite nice, something slightly different. So let's go back to pfSense, and I'm going to take out the DNS server here. I don't want that. And so with that saved, if we now go back to Services, and this time to DNS Resolver. So on the DNS Resolver page, I'm going to scroll down to the bottom here, and we see this section, Host Overrides. I'm going to click onto Add here, and for host, that's going to be the subdomain, so that's going to be LAN Cache, and for the domain, that's going to be steamcontent.com. So what this is doing is setting the address lancache.steamcontent.com, and I want it to resolve not to the LAN Cache DNS this time, but directly to the LAN Cache container. So for me, that IP address is 10.10.20.225. And description, I'm just going to call it Steam Games. So with that done, I'm going to scroll down, click onto Save, and then Apply Changes. Now looking at Unraid, we can see that the LAN Cache container is stopped, it's not running. So let's minimize this. Let's open up a command prompt and clear the DNS with ipconfig space / flush DNS. And also let's refresh the IP address as well with ipconfig / renew. And if we look here at our IP configuration, we can see the DNS is the router. But now we can ping Google and the LAN Cache container stopped, but our internet's still working. And if we ping lancache.steamcontent.com, then we're getting a reply from the container. So if your router gives you the option to actually set individual DNS overrides, I think this is a really nice way to do it. But obviously to do that, you need to know the URLs that the CDNs use. And to find that out, then go to lancache.net, click onto Docs here, and if we scroll down, under LAN Cache DNS, if we click General here, Then we can see here that the list of all of the supported CDNs are available here on this UK LAN's GitHub repository. And so this is where I got the URL for Steam. Okay. So there's one final way I'm going to show you that you can actually change your DNS if you're on a Windows machine. This wouldn't be any good for a LAN party, but maybe if you don't want to change the DNS on your network or your PC, well, we can actually edit what's called the host file. Okay, so on the laptop, I've now set everything back to default, and I've deleted the host override in my pssense router. So now if I ping lancache.steamcontent.com, it's resolving over the internet directly to the CDN. Okay, so to change this, what I'm going to do is open up the file browser here, and under my C drive, I'm going to go to Windows, then System32, Drivers, etc, and then here my host files. I'm going to edit it. I'm using Notepad++, and I suggest you use that as well. So now editing the file, at the bottom here, underneath everything else, without a hashtag, I'm going to type 10.10.20.225. Obviously, that's the IP address of my LAN cache. And then here, I'm going to type lancache.steamcontent.com. So this is exactly the same, really, as what we did in pfSense, but just local only for this machine. Setting the destination for lancache.steamcontent.com to being that of the IP address of my LAN cache container. So now I'm going to save this file by just clicking exit to come out of it. Now it's going to say that it can't save it because I'm not in administrator mode. So Notepad++ is asking to launch in administrator mode, which I want to do. And so now when I close it and save it, it's going to work correctly. Okay, so let's close this. And now let's open up a command prompt. Let's type ping lancache.steamcontent.com and see what we get. Okay, so perfect. So it's resolving to our LAN cache container. Okay, so using the host files to manage your DNS, that can be useful for a single computer in your house on which you want it to be able to use the LAN cache. But anyway, there's a few ways you can actually manage the DNS, a few different methods. You just need to pick one that works best for you and make sure your DNS is pointing to the correct place. Okay, so now let's have a look at the LAN cache in action, actually downloading a game. I've got the DNS on this laptop all set up pointing to the correct place. Now my internet connection at the moment, like I've said, it's using cell data because I'm waiting for my proper fiber broadband to be installed. So downloading anything is pretty slow. Okay, let's minimize this and open up Steam. And I'm going to install this game here, God of War. So what's going to happen now, because my DNS is all pointing to the correct place, the LAN cache isn't going to have this game available locally. So this game is going to be downloaded, and as it downloads to this PC, it's going to be cached and saved in the LAN cache. So then when I install it elsewhere, it's going to be much faster. Okay, so let's get this installed now. And the game started downloading. And if I click here, as you can see, the speed's really slow. So it's going to take a long time for the game to download. You can see here it's going to take about 2 hours to download because the internet connection's so slow. So let's come back when that's done and we'll take it from there. Okay, so now God of War has finished downloading on the laptop. And the files are installed here on the laptop and I can play the game. So not only has the game been downloaded locally onto the laptop's SSD, because the DNS was going through the LAN cache, then the game is also being cached by the LAN cache container as well. Now, it may not always be convenient to fill the LAN cache by downloading each game that you want to have stored. So what we can also do is use a companion container, which is called prefill LAN cache. And using that, we can choose games which we want to have pre-filled in the LAN cache without actually having to download them on any PC first. So let's take a look at that. Okay, to install a container, we need to go to Community Applications and search for LAN Cache. And here I'm going to install the LAN Cache prefill container. We're going to get a warning as before about the use of a custom network. Just click onto OK. Now this container, it's slightly more difficult to set up than the others, but it's still pretty simple. Now just one quick tip. When you have a container and there's a lot of instructions in the overview, if you're on advanced view, well, it's quite hard to read. So just toggle on to basic view and the text becomes much easier to see. But anyway, to fill in this container, actually we need to set it onto advanced view, because the first thing we need to do is under the extra parameters here, after restart unless stopped, we want to put a space, then hyphen and DNS equals, and here you want to put the IP address not of the LAN Cache server but of the LAN Cache DNS server. And for me, this is 10.10.20.224. Now when we're using the prefill container, we need to use both the LAN Cache DNS container and the LAN Cache container as well. We need both those containers. Now scrolling down here, the data path, we can leave it as it is. If you're using Battle.net and you want to prefill that, then you can enable Battle.net here. I'm not going to, I just want to prefill Steam. So under enable Steam prefill here, I'm going to leave that set to true. Steam fill parameters, I want that as recent. And the schedule here, this is set to run every day at 2 AM. I'm going to leave that as it is. I'm going to leave check prefill for updates set to true. And here where it says force update, we normally leave this set on false. If every time you started the container, you wanted to force it to update, you'd set that to true. Okay, so that's the template. Really simple. Just click on to apply and pull down the container. Then once the container's pulled down, click on to done. And now I'm going to go back to my Docker tab here. And if I click onto the container and I go to logs here, because this is the first time I'm using the container, it's telling me that the Steam prefill's not configured, and it gives some instructions what to do here. Now I've put what we need to type in the description of this video. So I'm going to close this and I'm going to open up a terminal window into the container. And the first thing we need to put in here is su space $user. So just paste that in from the description and hit enter. Now next I've combined two lines together. So again, copy this from the description and paste it in and hit enter. And now it's going to ask for your Steam account name here. So pop that in. And now it's going to ask for your Steam password. Again, pop that in. Oops, it looks like I did my password wrong there. Okay, that's better. So now if your account's protected by SteamGuard, you're going to need to check your email address and then put in the code. So pop your code in here and hit enter. Now it's going to log into Steam and retrieve all of the games that you've got in your Steam account. Now this is really simple here. We just go through each game and put a check next to it for which one we want to download and pre-fill into our LAN cache. Now actually I'm just going to do one here that's going to be fairly small. I'm going to choose Half-Life and maybe Half-Life 2. Okay, so once you've chosen the games you want to pre-fill, just hit enter. And it's going to ask if you want to run the pre-fill now or you want to wait till 2 AM on the schedule that we had set in the template. I just want it to run now. So with the yes selected, I'm just going to hit enter. And then with my super slow internet, this is going to take a while to download. It looks like I already had Half-Life there, so it's on the Half-Life 2 now. So while this is downloading, I'm just going to minimize this. And if I go to my shares here, and we have a look at the size of what this is taking up at the moment, it's taking up 103 gigs because I got a few games installed on the LAN cache. Now you might be wondering, how does this know to download into that share? Well, it's detected the LAN cache on the network and it's communicated with it. So it's downloading this straight into the share that we're using for the LAN cache. Okay, so we'll come back when this is done. Okay, so everything's finished now. And if I minimize this, we can be sure that it has downloaded into the correct place. Because if we check the size of the LAN cache share now, it's actually gone up. You can see it's now 107 gigs. Okay, so basically that's how to set up the LAN cache pre-fill. Now, I guess we better actually test out downloading a game using the LAN cache. You don't want to just take my word for it that it works. So I'm going to open up Steam. Okay, so on Steam, I'm going to download 2 games. Let's use a small one, Half-Life 2 here, and install that. I'm going to click on downloading here so we can look at the speed. And we can see here the speed shooting right up near 200 megs per second, and the game's downloaded pretty much before we can even look. Okay, so that was done really quickly, much faster than I could have downloaded 2 gigs over my internet. But that's a bit of a small game. Let's go back and pick something a bit bigger. Let's download Tekken 7. This is an 80 gig game. Again, I'm going to click on install, next, and then go to downloading here. Okay, so the download rate is already way over 100 megs per second, and it's telling us it's going to take about 5 minutes to install this game. So let's see if these speeds are consistent over the whole download and see if it really does take 5 minutes. So let's run a stopwatch and speed this up. So whilst this is downloading, let's just look at the core usage of the VM. The bottom 8 cores here are the VM that this gaming machine's running on, and they're currently at 100%. Now that's because when a game downloads on Steam, the files are often compressed, and they're decompressed during the download. And on that note, I think the reason we're seeing these little dips in speed here is because that's when I opened the browser on the VM, and so while it was decompressing, that opening of the browser, it actually slowed things down. And also, I'm recording the video on the same machine. Talking about the game decompression during download, if we look here, we can see it says it's downloaded 30 gigs out of 45, but here the fully downloaded and decompressed is 40 gigs out of 81. Okay, so the game's almost finished downloading now. The speed was pretty consistent all the way through, taking 5 minutes 44 seconds to download Tekken 7. Okay, so have I had any problems while using the Steam cache? Well, to be honest, yes I have. Let's look at that now. Okay, so now I'm going to attempt to download God of War from the Steam cache. I'm downloading this game to the same VM as I just downloaded Tekken 7 to. Both the VM and the Steam cache are on my Unraid server, but 9 times out of 10, this one game, it just doesn't download correctly for me. Okay, so let's go across to the downloads here and look at the speed. Straight away we can see that the speed isn't as fast as it was on Tekken 7. At the moment, it's just going up over 60-70 megs here. Now, I wouldn't really mind about that if it would stay like that all the way through. It's saying it's going to take about 6 or 7 minutes here. But in a moment, the speed, oh, it's already happening now, the speed's beginning to drop down. Now, I've no idea why this happens. It doesn't always happen with this game, but like I said, 9 times out of 10 it seems to do this. And the speed just seems to go lower and lower until it gets roughly around the same speed as my internet. Now, I've had a search online to see if other people have this problem, and I saw one post on Reddit where a few guys did. They seem to think it's dropping back and using the internet connection to download. Now, I don't think it's actually using the internet to download, but me thinking that, that's not enough. Let's do some experiments and test it and see if that's the case. So with a fresh download of God of War, I've uninstalled it and I'm going to reinstall it. So as before, the download starts pretty fast and then starts slowly dropping down. And so I'm going to go to the Unraid dashboard here. I'm going to look at the SSD on which the LAN cache share resides. Now, no Docker containers, no VMs use this SSD at all, and we can see that there's lots of reads at the moment coming from this drive. So now theoretically, if I pause the download, then the reads on that drive should also stop. And we can see the reads here are stopped on 1437805. So if the reads stop when we paused it, they should start again when we restart the download. And actually pausing the download and restarting it, it looks like the download is a bit quicker, and again it's dropping down. But we can see the reads on the drive, they're continuing. The data's definitely coming off this drive. It's not coming from the internet at all. I'm going to speed the video up and wait till the speeds drop right down. All the time we can see the reads coming off the SSD. And now if I hit the pause button, we can see the reads from this drive have totally stopped. So for me at least, this proves that when the speeds slowly go down, it isn't the fact that the Steam client is switching to the internet and not using the LAN cache, it's something else. Now, another problem I've had from time to time is memory usage with this container. Now, I haven't had this problem now for a long time. 14 days ago there was an update to this container, and since I updated I haven't had any problems. But what I'd find is sometimes when I was downloading through the LAN cache, is the memory usage of the container would get out of hand. It would just keep going up and up. Now you can see here it's going up to about 3 gigs. Not too bad you might think, but if you see here, when I started downloading a game after doing a few others, the memory usage now was at 10 gigs. And again, as the game's downloading, we just see the RAM use go up and up and up in that container until it gets up to around 18 gigs. Well, at least God of War actually downloaded this time. One of the rare occasions when it did. Now, like I said, since the update, I find the container's behaving itself, and I rarely see it go over 2 gigs. But if you do find this container using too much RAM, and you're worried it will cause your server problems due to lack of RAM, well, if you edit the template, and on advanced view, if you scroll down, under extra parameters, if you put hyphen hyphen, then memory equals say 5G for 5 gig, that will limit this container to only be able to use 5 gigs. So with that done, just click on to apply, and you can be confident now that the container won't use more than that. And we can see here now I've restarted the container. It's telling me it's using 207 megs out of 5 gigs. Like the other containers are allowed to use anything up to the full amount of RAM I've got in the server, up to 125 gigs. So if you've got a container that has a memory leak, limiting the memory can actually be quite a useful thing. Anyway guys, so that's all I've got about LAN caches, so that brings us to the end of this video. Now, sorry it went on for so long, I didn't really expect it to be such a long video, but that's just the way it turned out to be. But if you enjoyed the video, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up, and please share the video with anyone else who you think might find it useful. Now, I want to give a really big thank you to all of my patrons and supporters out there. Thank you guys so much for supporting me. Without you guys, I just wouldn't be able to make these videos, so I really appreciate all of your help. Anyway guys, it's getting late here and it's time for me to go, but whatever you're up to for the rest of the day, I hope it's good, and I'll catch you in the next video.